She was the fastest dragon in the sky and the only one who ever carried 2 queens. She wore scales of living scarlet, wings of pink shell light, and a crown of copper horns upon her head. She burned 800 men in a single pass before she died. And the last thing she ever did was close her jaws around the neck of a king's dragon and drag him from the heavens with her. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Dragons of Westeros, Episode 10, Meleys, the Red Queen. The histories say she was hatched on Dragonstone, in or before the year 75 after the conquest, in the long peace of King Jaehaerys the Conciliator. No one wrote her hatching down, no one thought to. The realm was full of dragons in those years, more than at any time since the conquest itself, and another red wormling on the smoking rock was simply one more small fire among the crowd. By the time men looked at her again, she had been moved to the Dragonpit of King's Landing, and she was beginning to show what she was. Her scales were scarlet, bright as fresh blood on snow. Her wing membranes were the pink of the inside of a shell, so thin that when the sun struck them from above, they turned to rose, and she seemed to fly with her own sunset strapped to her back. Her crest, her horns, her claws, all were the colour of polished copper. When she opened her jaws in the light, her teeth shone like a row of beaten metal spikes. She had not yet done anything, and already she looked like a queen. But her true gift was not her colour, it was her speed. The dragon keepers of the Red Keep said she could outfly Caraxes. They said she could outfly Vhagar. In the year 75, when they spoke of the swiftest dragons in Westeros, they spoke her name first. In that same year, a princess walked into the Dragonpit and asked for the biggest dragon they had. Her name was Alyssa Targaryen, 5th child of Jaehaerys and Alyssa, newlywed to her brother Balon the Brave, 15 years old and wild as winter wind. She wanted Balerion the Black Dread. She wanted the Mount of the Conqueror himself. The Dragon Keepers refused her. The old dragon was too heavy for a girl who meant to fly hard, they said. His wings were failing. He would die beneath her one day, and she would die with him. They led her instead to the Scarlet One. Alyssa claimed Meleys that day, and from the moment the Red Queen's wings opened above the pit, the bond was permanent. She flew her constantly. In the year 77, when her first son Viserys was only 9 days old, she bound the infant in swaddling against her chest and took him up into the sky on Meleys, high above King's Landing, the future king christened by cloud and fire before he could open his eyes properly. 4 years later, she did it again with her second son. The boy was not yet a fortnight old when his mother wrapped him to her body and climbed onto the Scarlet Dragon. That boy would grow into Aemond Targaryen, the rogue prince. The old tales say he loved dragons the way other men love wine and women. It was not a mystery. His mother had put him on one before he could see. Alyssa bore a third son in the year 84, and this time the labour almost killed her. She never truly recovered. Within the year, the wild princess who had outflown the Dragon Keepers was dead, 24 years old. The infant followed her half a year later. Balon the Brave was broken by it and would not remarry. And in the Dragonpit, the Red Queen was left without a rider. She waited 3 years. In the year 87, a 13-year-old girl walked into the pit alone. Her name was Rhaenys Targaryen. She was the only daughter of Prince Aemon, the heir of Jaehaerys, the boy everyone believed would one day be king. She had been raised as the heir's heir. She had been promised, without the promise being spoken aloud, that the Iron Throne would come to her blood after her grandfather was gone. She was serious, proud, and already a better rider than most of the boys at court. Meleys accepted her. For the next 42 years, the Scarlet Dragon would have only one rider and only one name. Rhaenys would outlive her father, her husband's brothers, a king, 2 of her own children, and most of her friends. The Red Queen would be the one thing in her life that never left her. In the year 90, Rhaenys married the most famous mariner in the world, Lord Corlys Velaryon of Driftmark, the sea snake. She insisted on arriving at her own wedding on her dragon. There was no mistaking what kind of woman the sea snake was marrying that day. 2 years later, a Myrish crossbow bolt struck her father in the throat on the island of Tarth, and her father drowned in his own blood on a foreign mountain. Jaehaerys, grieving and old, passed his dead son's daughter over. He named her uncle Balon, his heir, instead. Rhaenys was pregnant when the decree came. Her uncle Boremund Baratheon protested. House Stark protested. House Manderley protested. The king would not be moved. The girl who should have been the heir's heir was set aside in silence. 9 years later, the question opened again. Balon the Brave died of a burst belly, and a great council was called at Harrenhal to settle the succession once and for all. More than 1,000 lords came. 14 claims were weighed. Rhaenys and her daughter were set aside for their sex. Her son Lenor was defeated by the vote of 20 lords to 1, and the crown passed instead to the infant she had once carried in her chest as a babe, Alyssa's boy, Viserys. The fool mushroom gave Rhaenys a name that day, and the name followed her for the rest of her life, the Queen Who Never Was. Twice the Iron Throne had been close enough to see. Twice she had been turned away from it. And in the yards of the Dragonpit, Meleys flew on. For 26 years, the Red Queen was part of the splendor of the realm without being part of its power. Rhaenys flew her at tournaments, at royal progresses, over the Velaryon fleet, across the narrow sea and back. Scarlet wings crossed and recrossed the skies of Westeros for half a lifetime of peace. She buried a daughter, she buried a son. She watched Viserys the Peaceable grow old on the throne that should have been hers. And then, in the year 129, the king died, and the peace died with him. The Greens moved before Dragonstone could answer. They meant to crown the king's son, Aegon II, in the Dragonpit before Princess Rhaenyra could claim her father's throne. Rhaenys was trapped inside King's Landing when the coup came. She slipped their guards, reached the pit, and climbed onto her scarlet dragon. Meleys burst free of the Dragonpit in a roar of wings and flame. She did not crash into any coronation. The histories are quieter than that. She simply climbed into the sky above the city, passed over the Red Keep with the Queen Who Never Was on her back, crossed the Blackwater, and carried her mistress east to Dragonstone and the Black Council. It was the first time in the Dance of the Dragons that a dragon flew against the Greens. It would not be the last fire she brought them. Months later, Ser Criston Cole, Hand of the Usurper King, marched a host out of King's Landing to cow the Crownland's lords, who still held for Rhaenyra. He came to Rook's Rest, and Lord Staunton sent his ravens screaming south to Dragonstone, begging for a dragon. Rhaenys volunteered. Alone. She had been passed over twice by kings, and she would not let the next lord who called for her be passed over as well. She took Meleys into the sky, a grandmother of 55, on a dragon who had been hers for 42 years, and flew south. What waited for her was a trap. Criston Cole had set scorpions along the ridges, great iron bolt crossbows of a kind the dragon keepers had begun to fear. He had massed his archers, and he had 2 dragons hidden somewhere above the clouds. When the Red Queen came down on his lines, the scorpion bolts tore at her scales and did not harm her. They only enraged her. She dropped out of the sky onto 800 men and their horses, and in a single pass she burned them all where they stood. The field was hers. The trap had failed on the ground, and then the clouds opened above her. Out of them came Sunfyre the Golden, with King Aegon II on his back. And out of them, slower, enormous, ancient, came Vhagar, with Aemond One-Eye on hers. 3 dragons met in the same sky over the fields of Rook's Rest, the first time in the war it had ever happened. The first time any living man could remember. Rhaenys was outnumbered 2-1, and the second of the two was the oldest and largest living dragon in the world. She could have turned and fled. Meleys was still the swifter. She chose instead to fight. The Red Queen flew straight into the attack. Her jaws closed around the neck of Sunfyre, and her bite tore the golden dragon half out of the sky, the king still in his saddle, screaming. Above them, Vhagar dropped. All three dragons crashed to the earth in a tangle of wings and teeth and fire. When the smoke cleared, Vhagar rose unhurt. Sunfyre did not rise at all. One of his wings was half torn from his body, and he would never fly as he had before, and the wound in his neck would eat him slowly in the seasons to come. Meleys was broken on the ground where she had fallen, her body ripped apart by the force of the impact. And beside her lay a second shape, so blackened by fire that no man could say with certainty who it had been. The maesters who wrote the histories would not commit. They say only that the body was thought to be Rhaenys Targaryen. They say only that the queen who never was never seen again. Her head was cut from her body, loaded onto a cart, and hauled back to King's Landing behind Aemond One-Eye. They drove it through the streets of the capital, the scarlet head of the Red Queen drawn slowly past doorways and taverns, past mothers holding their children's eyes, past old men who had seen her fly over this city for 40 years. The small folk were awed into silence. Thousands began to flee the city at the sight of her. Dowager Queen Alyssa Hightower ordered the gates of King's Landing closed and barred to stop the exodus. The Red Queen had taken 800 men with her, crippled the king's dragon, burned and broken the king himself for nearly a year, and carried the cause of the Blacks into the sky for the first time in the war. She had lost to nothing smaller than the weight of an older age. The queen who never was dead. And above her, on a dragon from a different century, Aemond One-Eye rode home to King's Landing in silence. So tell me this. When they laid the blackened body down beside the carcass of Meleys, and the maesters wrote that it could not be known for certain, do you think it was Rhaenys? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the dragons of Westeros, the ones who flew before our history, and the ones who fell in the fires of the dance, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, we follow the most beautiful dragon ever born in Westeros. Gold scales so bright they hurt the eye in the sun. Wing membranes of pink shell light like the Red Queen's own. The pride of a usurper king. The dragon whose wings were broken at Rook's rest. The dragon who in secret killed a ghost. The dragon who was finally brought down by another a quarter his size, and whose last act upon this earth was to eat a queen alive while her son watched. His name was Sunfyre the Golden, and his dying was almost as terrible as his fire.